One of the most important skills in art history is the skill of describing, finding the words to express the complexity of form. We've chosen a modern painting, one that was painted in 1959 by Giorgio Morandi, an Italian artist, because it seems very simple, and so it should be easy to find words to describe it. Okay, so let's start. This is a relatively small painting. We actually are both standing less than 3 feet away. We want to come up close and really be able to see it.
It's almost square in format, and we're clearly looking at a still life. I see what look like bottles on a tabletop, a cup. I'm reading that light lavender as a table meeting a horizon line of the wall, which is a light gray behind it, and these objects placed on the table, even though there is no indication of their weight, or they don't cast shadows. So these are things my mind is inferring.
I want to start with the ground before we even get to those objects. I see a little band of gray-yellow at the very bottom, this lavender field, and then above that, more of that yellowish gray. All of that is rendered with a fairly wet brush so that you can actually see the paint strokes, and you get a sense that the oil paint is functioning almost like watercolor. It's been thinned out so that there are areas where the paint is almost missing, and you can actually see back to the surface of the canvas behind it.
What is most apparent to me is the difference between what my mind wants to do to what I'm seeing and the very stripped down information that I'm given in the painting. In the case of the small fluted bowl in the foreground center, I have more of a sense of its placement on a table because of the darker paint that surrounds it that acts as a shadow and gives me a sense that this is a three-dimensional object, although that lavender ground gives me no indication of recession into space.
We seem to be looking across at that bowl, and yet we're also seeing a bit of the ovoid at the top. That is, we're looking down at the bowl at the same time. So there is a little bit of a discontinuity.
Although I want to read those as bottles or carafes of some sort sitting on the table, I wonder why their necks don't seem symmetrical, why the purple paint seems to sometimes come in front of the yellowish white paint of what I assume to be these bottles.
If we look at the bottle on the left and we look at the right side of that bottle, you can see that there's a gray vertical line. Now that might be the tabletop because it's the same color as the tabletop. But at the same time, I read that as a facet of the bottle itself, that is, of its right side receding in space. It is very slippery what's happening here as we try to make sense of these forms in space. Another example is that green rectangle that emerges from the back edge of the bowl in front and separates the two bottles. At first, we assume that that's a shadow, because after all, it's in between them and perhaps one of the bottles is casting that shadow. But the top of it is flat, and it wouldn't be flat if it was a cast shadow. And so it becomes both a negative space and perhaps a form that's in part hidden behind those bottles.
The bottle on the right has a few horizontal lines of white paint that read like the reflection of glass. But the one on the left doesn't have those and is painted in a very flat and matte way without any of that sense of reflectivity.
The thing that probably bothers me the most in this painting, and I should say bothers me in a good way because it makes me question what I'm seeing, is the back of the table, which I want to have a continuous arcing form, as if this is the back of a large round table. But right around the shoulders of the bottles, that table edge seems to deform and seems to become a bit more parallel with what I take to be the shoulders of the bottles, so that the back of the table seems to edge up. Or am I possibly looking down at the depth of the bottles? It's impossible to know. But what I come away with is the sense that the artist seems willing to distort what he sees for the internal logic of the canvas that he wants to end up with.
for me, this is about a relationship between the painting and the viewer, because it feels so much about confounding my expectations and a kind of insistence on illegibility. And so it feels like a painting that wants to surprise me and make me engaged and activated. Why do we read those two white lines as a reflection in the glass? Our mind and our eyes work together to make sense of the world, which is maybe not giving us as much information as we think it is.
So this extraordinarily simple painting of a few objects on a table that are not telling a story, that are not depicting a likeness, is raising fundamental issues of how we see, how we describe, and even of the history of art.
But the next question, why is this something of interest at this moment, in this place where the artist is? What is it about this historical moment that is calling for this kind of questioning?
But that would be the subject of another video.